succumb to voices from the other side, true encounters sent in by night workers, travelers, and the buildings that remember them. Tonight, 5 hotel hauntings. 5 rulebooks you won't find at the front desk. Names and locations have been altered for safety. Timelines are condensed, but the core events, as told to us, are real to the people who lived them. If you're listening in a hotel right now, maybe don't face the mirror. And if a red phone rings, answer on the 3rd. We begin at the Briarstone, where the call log insists a room exists that no blueprint will admit. The rule is simple. Answer the red phone on the 3rd ring and never say your name back. Story 1. Room 1313, Unlisted. The Briarstone Hotel was the kind of dignity that photographs well and breathes badly a face powdered for daylight and slick with sweat after midnight. I was hired because I looked steady on paper. A night auditor who'd done 2 years at a roadside chain without losing his temper or the till. A pleasant phone voice that turned firm on chargeback calls, someone who understood that hospitality is a polite lie we all agree to tell. My first week went the way first weeks do. Passwords scribbled on sticky notes, a drawer of rubber bands that smelled faintly of citrus and old bills, the realization that the lobby ferns were plastic, but the dust on them was real. On night 7, the house phone rang at 303A. Caller ID displayed a room number the system did not recognize, 1313. I let it ring once, twice, then answered because I was new and eager, because the silence of a sleeping lobby can make you crave any sound at all. Front desk, I said, and tried not to think about the number. What came back wasn't speech. It was breath dragged across a dry throat, a thin thread of air like wind sneaking under a door that had been painted shut. The whisper pressed into my ear, then withdrew, and I heard the neat, final click of a handset returning to a cradle. I set the receiver down like I'd been handed a wild thing that chose not to bite. Then I checked the property management system, the room status board, the floor plans hung in the back office with thumbtacks rusted in place. 12 floors at the Briarstone, a superstitious omission dressed as design. No 13th. And yet the call log printed the origin location with the stupidity of a machine that only knows what it knows. Room 1313. The manager had told me the rules on my first night, not as a ghost story to break the ice, but as policy. No housekeeping after midnight, she said, leaning her hip against the desk. No comps for the pool after hours, not even for VIPs. And if the red phone down by the pool rings, you answer it on the 3rd ring. Never the 1st, never the 2nd. What happens if you answer early? I asked, trying for a grin. She didn't give me one back. You don't, she said, and we don't ask. The pool phone rang for the first time on my 4th shift. The sound had a metallic burr. It was the kind of red you hear with your teeth. Once, twice. On the 3rd, I lifted the receiver and said what all front desk clerks say when the hotel asks them to be a person. Front desk. At first, there was nothing but a hiss that reminded me of dial-up modems, that long-distance, sandpapery rush. Underneath it, a wet settling, a kind of patient glug, as if a heavy shape were sinking into a deep bowl. I glanced at the black and white security feed bolted above the lifeguard chair. The pool lay still in the glass of the monitor, dark as a plate, smooth enough to lie to a sky. Then the surface puckered, pushed inward by nothing I could see, and smoothed itself again like a body composing its features. I hung up, moved through the steps of a person who believes in wiring and technical faults, wrote it up as intermittent line noise, and went back to the desk with the smell of chlorine in my throat. The nights inched by. Guests came in from delayed flights with faces like bruises. Housekeeping's cart squeaked in the back hall like a thing apologizing for existing. The lobby's grandfather clock ticked the way a lung does when it forgets it's a machine. On night 9, the internal line rang again. 3:03 a.m., a number that felt practiced. Caller ID 1313. I pressed the speaker button and traced the origin line through the switchboard. The little green LEDs marched a route into the old part of the building, the sealed wing behind the banquet halls, where the carpet swallowed sound like a promise. I took the skeleton key ring from the safe and told myself I was just checking wiring. Curiosity arrives in hotels as service. Back there, the air had weight. It sat on my shoulders like a damp coat and smelled of pressed linen and old perfume that stubbornly sweetened the mold. Numbers had been stenciled in black along the service corridor in a practical municipal font. 1109, 1111, 1113. Odd numbers only, skipping in an offbeat that made me want to step wrong. The hall ended in drywall patched and repainted to match regulation eggshell. Someone had rolled a door into the patch anyway. The brass numerals glinted like clean teeth. 1313. The knob turned and turned without catching. Keys disagreed with the lock, as if it had made other arrangements. I pressed my ear to the wood and felt a faint vibration against bone, the distant ring of a phone, damped by plaster, as if the wall had learned to cradle sound. Back at the desk, I scrubbed the footage between 2 and 4 in the morning until my eyes skated and burned. Most feeds sulked in their grayscale, empty corridors, elevators politely sleeping open, the pool a patient black. In the lobby camera, I found myself head down, elbows on the desk, a man trying to look like a vigil. Then, between one frame and the next, someone stood behind me, tall, shoulders draped in something that shone not with light, but with wetness. Hair slicked flat in a parting reinvented by fingers that had learned how to comb from memory, not from habit. The figure lifted an arm slowly. In the next frame, I lifted mine, a beat late, a puppet in a video with a bad connection. I turned around in the empty lobby and saw absence organize itself into furniture. That was when the house phone rang. 1313. I unplugged the line from the wall. It kept ringing, as if the call had found a way into the lobby that had nothing to do with wire. The ledger lived in the safe, bound in leather that had absorbed other people's hands. Its corners were green with age and damp. I opened it and found what you find in any ledger: comped parking and notes about VIP amenities, and someone's precise rage about minibar counts. And beneath that, entries that read like apologies to something that never checked in. The earliest page was penned in careful ink, whose loops still had personality after a half-century. Pool open to guests. Week later, one incident. No family, no name. Rules adopted. The entries that followed were variations on a single theme in different hands and different years. The calls come, the pool answers. The door doesn't open, the building will have its due. Between 2 pages, someone had tucked a Polaroid. The sealed door at the end of the corridor stared back the same paint, the same eggshell wall, but the brass numbers were missing. Holes left like wounds where screws once took a shine. The desk phone shivered under my palm. I lifted it and tried to fit my voice into the part it would be expected to play in a story like this. Front desk. The whisper that came back was still a shape more than a word. This time it made a syllable, a half-made thing. It said my name the way a tape recorder says your name back, not because it loves you, but because it can. After that, I made rules of my own. The manager's rules were for guests who threatened chargebacks and drunks who demanded towels at 3 a.m. Mine were for buildings. If it says your name, don't say it back. If a door appears where it shouldn't, it isn't for you. If something drowned in a place that wasn't meant to be water, every door becomes a shore. On night 9, the internal line rang again. 3:03 a.m. A number that felt practiced. Caller ID 1313. I pressed the speaker button and traced the origin line through the switchboard. The little green LEDs marched a route into the old part of the building, the sealed wing behind the banquet halls, where the carpet swallowed sound like a promise. I took the skeleton key ring from the safe and told myself I was just checking wiring. Curiosity arrives in hotels as service. Back there, the air had weight. It sat on my shoulders like a damp coat and smelled of pressed linen and old perfume that stubbornly sweetened the mold. Numbers had been stenciled in black along the service corridor in a practical municipal font. 1109, 1111, 1113. Odd numbers only, skipping in an offbeat that made me want to step wrong. The hall ended in drywall patched and repainted to match regulation eggshell. Someone had rolled a door into the patch anyway. The brass numerals glinted like clean teeth. 1313. The knob turned and turned without catching. Keys disagreed with the lock, as if it had made other arrangements. I pressed my ear to the wood and felt a faint vibration against bone, the distant ring of a phone, damped by plaster, as if the wall had learned to cradle sound. Back at the desk, I scrubbed the footage between 2 and 4 in the morning until my eyes skated and burned. Most feeds sulked in their grayscale, empty corridors, elevators politely sleeping open, the pool a patient black. In the lobby camera, I found myself head down, elbows on the desk, a man trying to look like a vigil. Then, between one frame and the next, someone stood behind me, tall, shoulders draped in something that shone not with light, but with wetness. Hair slicked flat in a parting reinvented by fingers that had learned how to comb from memory, not from habit. The figure lifted an arm slowly. In the next frame, I lifted mine, a beat late, a puppet in a video with a bad connection. I turned around in the empty lobby and saw absence organize itself into furniture. That was when the house phone rang. 1313. I unplugged the line from the wall. It kept ringing, as if the call had found a way into the lobby that had nothing to do with wire. The ledger lived in the safe, bound in leather that had absorbed other people's hands. Its corners were green with age and damp. I opened it and found what you find in any ledger: comped parking and notes about VIP amenities and someone's precise rage about minibar counts. And beneath that, entries that read like apologies to something that never checked in. The earliest page was penned in careful ink, whose loops still had personality after a half-century. Pool open to guests. Week later, one incident. No family, no name. Rules adopted. The entries that followed were variations on a single theme in different hands and different years. The calls come, the pool answers. The door doesn't open, the building will have its due. Between two pages, someone had tucked a Polaroid. The sealed door at the end of the corridor stared back the same paint, the same eggshell wall, but the brass numbers were missing. Holes left like wounds where screws once took a shine. The desk phone shivered under my palm. I lifted it and tried to fit my voice into the part it would be expected to play in a story like this. Front desk. The whisper that came back was still a shape more than a word. This time it made a syllable, a half-made thing. It said my name the way a tape recorder says your name back, not because it loves you, but because it can. After that, I made rules of my own. The manager's rules were for guests who threatened chargebacks and drunks who demanded towels at 3 a.m. Mine were for buildings. If it says your name, don't say it back. If a door appears where it shouldn't, it isn't for you. If something drowned in a place that wasn't meant to be water, every door becomes a shore. The first guest for 1313 arrived 3 nights later. She came in soaked to the skin by a rain that had the same personality as a persistent salesman, and asked for a room off the books, if possible. She said the phrase the way a person says if the doctor advises. I printed a key in the back office with a number the printer did not know how to write. The key spit out blank and warm, and I handed it to her across a desk that had learned to be helpful. We have a room, I said, and watched the elevator on the camera. The display blinked. L2, 4, 7, 9. Between 12 and nothing in the building's official memory, a dash of static, like snow across a face. She stepped off into a corridor that organized itself around her footsteps. I did not call to say good evening. I did not ask whether she would like a wake-up. Hotels acquire their own weather. After the guest in 1313 checked in, the Briarstone's air changed. The lobby felt delicately relieved, like a person whose headache has backed away a little and will return when the AC kicks back on. The pool stopped moving when no one looked at it and returned to the honest little ripples of a private sea when a guest swam their laps. Housekeeping stopped finding damp footprints where no one had walked. The red phone napped like a cat with one eye open. Then the ledger began to ask for things, not in words to my face that would have required admitting that I had a face, but in red lines that appeared on the page where blue lines habitually went. 01, 13 deliver extra towels to 408 before they ask. 02, 02 reprint key for 611, leave on desk. 02, 27 place glass of water center of nightstand in 512. I did these things because the hotel made it easy. I folded corners without creasing the paper's temper. I printed keys that announced themselves to the printers as errors, but opened doors anyway. I set a glass of water in an exact center that felt more specific than geometry. The building liked my obedience. Guests praised me in reviews as calm, helpful, preternaturally attentive. Someone left a letter addressed to night manager on a postcard of the old facade that looked a little like a throat. Thank you for the quiet. We slept. The ledger started adding a word to my night. Good. It wrote it in red in a hand that balanced an elegance against a directive, like a schoolteacher grading a paper by a child she believed could learn. It was easy, then, to give the hotel a little more. Sleep is the first thing that gets comped in a job like this. You give the building hours you do not log, and in return it keeps the lights on and the doors locked, and lets you pretend a lobby can be a room. Nights bled into each other. I ate peanut butter crackers from the vending machine and watched the way the chandelier sheds a few lost crystals every month and forgives the loss by sparkling harder. The book wrote fewer goods and more again. On the third week, my wrist bore a stamp I didn't remember agreeing to. Hexagonal, deep blue, letters blurred by the damp that maps time at 2 in the morning. In-house. It got to the part where my keys collected lint in my pocket without doing the usual thing keys do. Promise a door that wants you. The hotel created needs for me to meet. The red phone stayed polite. The pool surface made the quiet of a sheet pulled over a face and left it there. The relief in the building's imaginary lungs began to fade, and a new pressure replaced it, a demand for balance, with more places to put what the world didn't know what to do with. You learn your building's history from plaques and gossip. The Briarstone's pool had been outdoor until the late 80s, brought inside when a developer decided luxury could be bought with a roof. The old newspaper clippings in the frame by the elevators talked about the grand opening. The staff told a different opening. The week the pool was covered, a storm came in off the river like a mouth and swallowed the power, and someone disappeared. No family, no name. The ledger's first entry was not lying to me. It was telling the only truth buildings can. Something happened, and we made rules to keep it from happening again. And then we learned what rules do in the face of a thing that does not need a door. On the 28th night, my double came back. The time-stamped feed showed me behind the desk, chin in hand, reading the policy manual like a good boy. In the reflection of the lobby's glass door, my face, and behind it mine again, a little taller, hair wet with the kind of shine you can only get by being underwater and coming up fast. The figure lifted a hand. In the next frame, I lifted mine after a lag that felt like a tendon stiff with disuse. I didn't turn. I looked at the ledger instead and tried a new rule. If a building introduces you to your own double, don't acknowledge the introduction. The book wrote a time and an instruction. 0303 compa room. I wrote a question beneath it. For whom? The red hand answered immediately without looking like it had moved. For the building. What do you want? I asked the lobby air, quiet enough that the security guard dozing in the back office would think it was the AC cycling. A pause, then letters that seemed to rise from the page like condensation on a cold mirror. Nights, ones that don't end. We house what hurts, the Briarstone had told me once through pipes. It repeated itself now, the way good teachers do. We house what hurts, and we house the people who keep the house. You can trade anything in a hotel if you can convince it to accept the payment. I stayed awake long enough that sleep stopped being something I had and became something the building wanted from me. When I finally closed my eyes, I did it standing behind the desk, because that way I could say I hadn't meant it. I woke with my hand on the bell, and the sound of a ring that didn't belong to the bell, but to a throat that had learned the trick. The stamp on my wrist had darkened and softened at the edges. It looked like the kind of ink that you cannot wash out because it came from inside you. The elevator doors opened then, obedient as if I had pressed the button. No guest stood between them. The car smelled faintly of warm coins. My double did not get on. It turned away from the car to face the desk, and though I refused it my face, it had mine. Front desk, my voice said from a mouth that didn't need me. We have a complaint from 1313. Room unoccupied. I asked the room because you can sometimes teach a building to tell you what it already decided. The ledger wrote before the question mark had finished being ink. Audit incomplete. We had forgotten something, not just the power and the roof and the chlorine, and the way the pool surface learned the language of a mirror. We had forgotten that occupancy is a balance, and the first guest had been one person. The building wanted more. It wanted someone to watch the books, and someone to keep the room, and someone to be the voice that called the desk when nobody else would, and the third ring itself. It wanted redundancy because it remembered being without. That was when the traveler came in from the storm, as if the hotel had invited her, which of course it had. She wore a parka full of rain and a face full of deciding. Do you have something quiet? She asked. Something off the books. Her money came out of a pocket in small damp bills, loyal as dogs. I handed her a warm blank key and thought about the way you can be careful with a person and still introduce them to a room. She said thank you in a voice that sounded like the last good hour of a long drive and stepped into the elevator. The camera did what it had learned. Forgot to register any floor between 12 and the understandable. The doors opened onto a corridor that put itself together because she had asked it to. We are required to keep an incident log, even for things we cannot name. I wrote guest accommodated in a calm hand. I wrote no disturbances. I wrote will follow up. The ledger opened to a page I did not feel myself turning, and wrote something in red that looked like an apology or a sentence. Good. Then I began to lose time. In that way hotels do, the middle of the night became the morning without consulting me, and I found myself explaining to Charmaine that the phones had been chatty, and the pool breaker had tripped once when I knew it had tripped twice, and I shoved my stamp mark wrist into my pocket so she wouldn't ask about theme nights. The calendar on the screen learned to schedule the blank reservation every third night with the kind of confidence that looks like a habit pretending to be design. The red phone napped, the pool didn't practice faces, the double didn't appear for a week. I got used to the quiet, and then remembered all at once that quiet is not rest. It is what buildings do when they are thinking. When the double did return, it wasn't at my back. It stood in the sealed corridor, where the drywall that had been a wall had learned to behave like a door. The brass 1313 had lost its shine. My double's hand sat on the knob like a demonstration. The camera mounted in the banquet hallway caught half a shoulder and the suggestion of hair in a slicked parting, which is what happens when you ask a machine to notice the wrong kind of person. The picture printed out in gray plastic strips, and I tucked one into the ledger where the Polaroid lived. Between them, they told the building's biography in the only language buildings have light bent and trapped. The night manager called me from home on her night off and asked, carefully, how I was down there. I said the right thing. Fine. She told me older auditors sometimes forgot to step outside on their break, and then forgot their breaks, and then forgot their outside. She said it the way a person warns you about black ice. If you need to leave, she said, leave. You can always come back. I thanked her because the politeness of the sentence mattered more than whether it was true. The automatic doors under the liveried doorman's crown would not open wide the next time I tried to walk through them. They opened 2 inches and touched gently before deciding to remain lips. Night 35 arrived like a letter that had been mailed to me from a city I hadn't visited but had always lived in. The ledger asked politely, 0303, comp a room for the building. I took a scrap of printer paper and wrote in capital letters, because I am a person. The book wrote back in a handwriting that had started to borrow the slope of my own. We house what hurts. Balance the books. The red phone rang once, twice. I answered on the third. The hiss on the line was familiar enough by then that I could hear the shape under it. The building had learned my breath and wanted to conduct it. What do you need? I asked. This is the question of my job in any version. What can I provide? Sleep, it said, not as a word, but as pressure in the floorboards and vents, the suggestion of rest bending the ceiling a fraction. Give us your nights, and we will remove from them the need to end. It is an indecent offer to make to a person. It is a fair offer to make to a clerk. I stayed. I stayed until the clock made the sound of settling and left bruises on my mind. I stayed until my couch at home became an idea a hotel had once had about furniture. I stayed until the room that used to be my bedroom learned how to be unoccupied without being empty. I stayed until I found a key card at my apartment, slid through the slot of my mail, embossed so faintly you needed a building to read it, no checkout. I still brought guests to rooms with numbers. I still printed folios. I still explained, gently but in writing because that's how you do it, that we could not comp the pool after hours, that we do not send housekeeping after midnight. People threaten chargebacks, and I thought of how you can threaten water. A man in 409 called to ask if there was supposed to be someone in the shower already, and I heard my voice say, "I'll send more towels." On the ledger, the word "good" appeared with a little flourish, as if the building had decided to enjoy me. The blank reservation kept coming. Every third night, 1313 surfaced and sank. I learned to stop waiting for the phone and started listening for other kinds of rings. The elevator's chime, when nobody had pressed a call button, the faint bell inside the front door's motor, the way the pool room has a ringing to it that isn't sound, but the insistence of a surface under tension. On the night the fire alarm tested itself and failed, the building remembered that its lungs could flood. The alarm chirped and died like a wick that had run out of courage. Smoke leaked under the doors with courtesy, like a guest asking a question you cannot deny. We emptied the 9th floor as practice for something the building needed us to imagine properly. And when we gathered in the parking lot, the air smelled like warm plastic and a sugar that had gone too far and wanted to apologize. The manager brought out a clipboard with names I didn't recognize and columns labeled memory, and lost and found, and asked us to sign for people who weren't there. We did. It made the loops shut. The ledger wrote "thank you" in a hand I had not seen yet, my own with my mother's tidy vowels. I stood under a sky that was too clear for fire and pressed ink from my wrist onto my palm and thought, there are buildings for whom gratitude is an exchange rate. You want a clean ending, I know. You want me to leave, to break the rules, to run all the way to the river and watch the windows of the Briarstone recede like teeth, to stand there and breathe air that does not taste like chlorine, and say a word like free and have it stick. Or you want me to open 1313 and lie down and let the bed be a shape around me, and accept that everyone who works nights wants someone to say their name, even if the person saying it is a room. But the truth is not cinematic. It is paper and ink and repetition, and a phone that rings only on the third. Here is what happens instead. The hotel adds a blank space to the night's ledger. 0303 audit complete. I initial it in blue and watch as red writes my initials over again, a little more beautifully. A traveler arrives with rain on her shoulders and says, "Is there anything quiet?" And I say, "We have a room." The elevator indicator finds a number it was not taught. A door in a wall that used to be drywall opens because the hotel has decided to soften. A person steps over a threshold and becomes a number, and I write it down because that is how we keep track of love. Sometimes, when the building is pleased with me, the phones do not ring. Sometimes a week goes by without red ink. Sometimes the AC hums like a chorus remembering a hymn. I sit behind the desk and let gravity have my chair. In the reflection of the lobby windows, I see a man who looks like me, and behind him, a man who looks like a better version of me, and behind that another. And I know what the camera will show if I rewind the footage. Gaps where there should be people, frames missing like teeth. I know what the ledger will write if I stop answering the third ring. Complaint from 1313. I know what the building will do if I try to leave. It will add a door where there wasn't one, a floor where there shouldn't be, a number that the printers cannot make, but the locks understand. It will make room because that is what hotels do. They make room and then name the act kindness. At 3:03 this morning, the red phone did not ring. The pool lay flat. The exit sign hummed. The elevators stayed where they were told. I took the ledger from the safe and ran a palm over its cover. It felt damp. On the inside back cover, an ink I had not seen before rose through the paper like a bruise. It spelled 2 words that could be an apology or a promise. Do not. Then a third that could be mercy or cruelty, depending on where you stand. Disturb. I put the book away and went to the sealed corridor out of habit or devotion. The numbers 1313 were darker than the brass around them now, as if the holes from the Polaroid had filled with shadow. I did not open the door. It did not open for me. We had an understanding. Every third night it would be occupied. Every night I would keep it that way. There's a call you never forget in a job like mine. And it isn't the angry guest at 2 in the morning asking where their dry cleaning has gone, or the honeymooners who need more champagne, or the parent whose child is practicing hotel hallways as racetracks. It is the call from a room that exists because the building remembers it needs to. It is the call that says a name because it can. It is the call you answer on the third ring because you have understood which part of the job matters. I had wanted to believe that answering that call would make me into something smaller than a person, a function, a noise, a page in a ledger. The opposite is true. It makes you into the voice a building uses when it has to talk to itself. It makes you the third ring, so if you find yourself in the Briarstone after midnight, and the lobby looks like a photograph of a lobby, and the ferns look like plastic with real dust, and the elevator dings as if it knows you better than you know your own floor, and you see a clerk behind the desk who looks like he hasn't slept, but somehow is not tired, ask for something off the books. Ask if there's anything quiet. He will tell you there is, will hand you a key that is warm and blank, because printers only know the numbers they were taught, and buildings no other numbers. He will watch the elevator on the camera and not flinch when the display forgets how to count. He will not ask about wake-up calls. He will not send housekeeping after midnight. If the red phone rings, he will answer on the third. If you see a door in a wall that used to be a wall, do not worry. The building is making room for you. It houses what hurts, and if, waking at 3 in a room that is smaller than a room and larger than a need, you pick up a beige plastic phone with no cord, and you put it to your ear, and you hear a breath drag itself into a shape, and the shape tries on your name. Understand. You are speaking with a voice the building made for itself from a clerk it decided to keep. Understand. There is a ledger open somewhere with a line written in an ink that you cannot wash off because you carry it inside your skin. Understand this above all. Some rooms are not built with brick and plaster. They are built by the third ring and the person who learns to answer it. I have learned. I am still learning. It is almost 3. The lobby is an empty mouth. The clock's tick is a throat clearing. The phone on the desk is quiet because the building is pleased, but I hear it anyway. The ghost of a ring that is not a sound, but the possibility of a sound. And I lift the receiver because that is what I do. Because this is the exchange we have agreed to. Because we tell each other polite lies. And sometimes the politest lies are the truest things we say. Front desk. I say into a line that connects to nothing and everything. And the building listens. And the building answers. And in the ledger a new entry writes itself in my hand, and I initial it. And I go on being here. And the doors stay shut or open 2 inches. And somewhere a pool practices the art of being a mirror. And you sleep, and I keep watch. And the room you don't see stays occupied, unlisted, undisturbed. If a hotel can invent a 13th floor to balance its books, what else can it add or erase? At midnight, our next account came from a traveler who tested an online rumor and found a button the panel never printed. He pressed 2 at 12:00. The elevator chose S. Story 2, the elevator that refuses midnight. The seaside hotel had the kind of architecture that dared the weather to ruin it. Long, white balconies, like rows of teeth, a glass atrium that tried to domesticate the sky. Palms planted in perfectly measured pairs that snapped in the wind like metronomes. In the brochures, it looked eternal and light-struck. In person, the building smelled faintly of salt and metal, like a ship that had learned how to stand still. I didn't come for rest. I came for a video. My channel lives at the edge, where travel content bleeds into the supernatural, liminal tourism. One commenter called it, half mocking and half adoring, haunted roads, closed attractions that aren't as closed as they think. Urban legends you can test with a single rule and a steady hand. The hotel had the right kind of story. At exactly midnight, the elevators refused to stop on even-numbered floors. 2, 4, 6, 8. At 12 o'clock, those buttons meant nothing. People online said it was a mechanical quirk, a setting. Others said it only started after a storm. The locals still talk about the way families talk about affairs. Everyone knows, no one names. I checked in just after sunset. The desk clerk gave me a smile that belonged to a painting and slid the key card toward me without letting our fingers touch. The lobby's fan palms made slow, practiced gestures. A bell cart glided by like a prop pushed by stagehands. The air felt overcooled and slightly wet, as if it had been rinsed. My room was on 9. I asked for 2. The clerk glanced at the digital chart, frowned at a space I couldn't see, and said, "We're moving some things around on that stack tonight. 9 is quiet, ocean view." A tiny pause, then, "Good elevator access." "Perfect," I said, and meant it. I don't scare easily. Fear is a camera trick. It lives in the cut between what you show and what you don't. You can carry it like a spare battery, heavy, charged, useful. But elevators make obedient subjects. They're predictable, measurable, visible. That's what I told myself as I set the tripod up in my room, framed the view, and recorded an A-roll intro. Rumors, plan, disclaimers, goofy charm. Then I slept like a tourist with purpose, shallow and eager, half in the bed and half in tomorrow. On the first night, I went down to the lobby around 11:40 with a coffee that tasted like a vending machine had tried to guess hazelnut. I filmed B-roll, chandelier, front desk, long shot of the glass doors reflecting the ocean's darkness back at itself. Clean room tones for the editor. No one paid me much attention. Hotels are spaces designed to ignore you beautifully. At 11:59, I stepped into the elevator alone. The car was a mirrored capsule with a brushed steel handrail and a panel that smiled at you in a precise corporate typeface. The LED showed L. The doors closed on a whisper. I lifted the camera, capturing my own face bright with caffeine and certainty, and pressed 2. The car slid upward with a hum that belonged in a temple, not a machine. L faded to 1. The ding sounded exactly once, polite and pleased, and then nothing. No pause, no slowdown, no second ding. The LED showed 3 as if 2 did not exist. I laughed into the lens. There you go. Urban legend confirmed. At midnight, 2 might as well be a wish. I pressed 4 out of curiosity. The carriage kept moving, ignoring the rectangular glow of my finger. When we passed 6, I felt the floor change, less a jolt than a decision. The LED blinked in a way I didn't know numbers could blink. Then it showed a letter. S. There was no S button. No S on the panel. No S printed on the neat little map by the doors that showed a body outline of the hotel with its arteries of stairs and the 4 clean squares of its elevators. The elevator began to descend, but not like elevators do. Not with the momentum of a shaft or the push of counterweights. We were going somewhere the building hadn't planned for, and the machine was making up a story it could live with. When the doors opened, a corridor waited, dressed for a decade that never quite happened. Carpet the color of unripe avocado, a pattern of waves that repeated without ever learning. Brass sconces that seemed copied from a ship's idea of land. A smell like salt that had been to finishing school. A plaque on the wall said SC level in a serif that made a point of being reasonable. I stepped out because that is what I do when a building presents me with a rule. Film it, test it, draw the line again, and watch it move. The corridor hummed every 20 feet. The same framed photograph of the same ribbon-cutting ceremony hung at the same height. But in each one, the scissors were a little more open, and the faces a little more blurred, as if the hotel had commissioned a series and given up halfway through the moment. The doors here used a numbering system that belonged to a math I hadn't studied. S02, S04, S06. They stood equally spaced, equally shy. S04 was ajar. The housekeeping seal had been torn with tidy fingers. Inside, the room was aggressively present. Bed made with triangular corners that threatened to cut. TV tuned to static snow that occasionally pretended it could see the sea behind it. A complimentary fruit bowl containing a single lime that had a bloom of salt on its skin like frost. On the desk, instead of a printed "Do Not Disturb," a painted sign. White cardstock, hand-lettered in brush strokes that took their time. Midnight is for the sea. I framed the sign, focusing until the edges of the letters sharpened, then widened the shot to catch the mirror over the desk. For a second, my reflection lagged behind my movement, as if the mirror had blinked. "Okay," I said very softly. Okay. When I turned to leave, he stood in the doorway. A bellman in a dark uniform from a catalog long since closed, brass buttons dulled by work, hair slicked into commas by water. His shoes made no sound on the carpet, but on the floor outside the threshold, small crescents of wet glistened and then vanished, as if thirsty fibers pulled the ocean into themselves. "You shouldn't have come down," he said kindly, like you say to a child who has wandered into the backstage area and seen the tricks. "I pressed 2, I said. The line sounded foolish even in my own mouth. He blinked as if he were trying to remember how. "Midnight is for the sea. I meant to ask a real question. Who are you? What is this place? Why S?" But my body had decided for me. I backed into the hall. The elevator's open mouth was very near and very relieved to receive me. The doors closed with a tactful hurry. The car rose. The LED found numbers again. When I reached the lobby, I walked into the real, boring air like I'd been underwater, and the world had remembered oxygen. In my room, I scrubbed the footage frame by frame until my eyes became a grid. The tally light blinked. The audio hissed when the doors opened. But the hallway was a hallway I recognized, carpet neutral and smug. No S, no avocado waves, no bellman. The mirror in the room showed me moving like a person, not a lagging shadow. The comments started anyway. Push notifications bloomed on my phone. Don't press even. Don't look at the mirrors at 12. Midnight belongs to the tide. Ask for high, odd floors only. If you see the bellman, do not accept the towel. None of those accounts existed the next morning. None had more than one post. They wore the same profile picture. A bellman standing in an elevator with water up to his shins, face blurred as if the camera had exhaled. I slept badly. Waves hit the windows in my dreams, too steady to be natural. In the morning, I filmed a reasonable update and drank a reasonable coffee on a reasonable balcony. And every time the elevator dinged somewhere in the building, my teeth ached. On day 2, I did what you do when you want to reframe fear as curiosity. I asked for help. The maintenance guy, silver mustache, utility belt that looked like a single-purpose Batman cosplay, was oiling a hinge on the service stairwell door. "Ever get elevator drift at night?" I said, holding my camera low, casual, turned off. He rolled one shoulder. "At midnight, the system load balances," he said. "Algorithm learns the traffic, keeps the car moving, doesn't dwell on even floors. Too many drunks forget where they're going and jam the doors." "S," I said. He paused, the oil can hovering over a squeal that sounded exactly like a small animal learning to sing. "You're not staff," he said softly. "Not a question. Stay off even at midnight. Take the stairs. Don't watch yourself in the doors. They lag." "Why?" "Because at midnight," he said, and pressed the rag into my hand as if that was the answer. "We respect the hour." On day 3, I filmed the kind of escalation my viewers expect. I prepared a monologue. I made it funny. I'd go in at midnight and press every even number. I'd force a stop on 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I'd prove a myth or disprove it, or most likely demonstrate a bug with a flourish. I'd be a person in a small box doing something foolish but charming. It's a living. At 11:58, the elevator opened with that anxious velocity machines get when they've practiced. I stepped in. The doors closed around me like advice. "Tonight," I said to the camera, "we're making this elevator say 2. I pressed 2. The car hummed and slid and ignored me. 3 lit obediently. I pressed 4, 6, 8 with the deliberate rudeness of a person testing a boundary. The panel glowed beneath my fingertips, then went politely dark. The elevator blinked. The letter appeared again. S. But the movement beneath my feet did not feel like descent. It felt like a decision to be elsewhere. When the doors opened, there was no corridor. The sea crawled into the elevator like a trained animal who had learned how to open a door with its body. Cold water wrapped my ankles and climbed. The smell was not beaky. It was the metallic throat of the ocean where things drown and go sweet. The bellman stood calf deep a few feet away, hands slack, hat gone. Behind him, a long procession of guests faced the horizon without concern. Some wore swimsuits, some wore tuxedos, the jackets dragged down by soaking. A child held the string of a balloon that had turned transparent. A woman in a gown stared straight ahead with the serenity of a saint on fire. "They all wanted a view," the bellman said, and his voice had learned softness the hard way. "We give the guests what they want." The water lifted to my knees. I hit door close with the desperation that turns politeness into violence. The doors attempted to kiss and found their lips full of ocean. The sensor gave up and tried again. The car's chime made a sound like a swallowed gasp. "Why me?" I asked, because it is a comforting question, and the answers never change. Because you asked, because you pressed the wrong thing, because some hours belong to something else and will take back what you try to borrow. "You pressed even," the bellman said. "Even is never at midnight." The sand sucked at my shoes. The car's floor was no longer floor, it was shore. "Give it back," I said. I don't know what I meant. My footage, my sense of being at the center of my own body, the part of night that belongs to land. The sea did. The doors snapped shut with sudden, indecorous force. The car hauled itself upward like a fish refusing the line. The panel stuttered through SL 123 so fast it felt like an apology. The doors opened on the second floor's carpet, neutral and smug. I stumbled out, soaked and ringing. In the recording, an empty lift. My voice making brave jokes in a metal box. Sound design that would embarrass a bad editing intern. Faint waves under compressor hiss. The comments arrived anyway. "Good choice. Don't try again. If the elevator learns your name, take the stairs for a year. Midnight is for the sea." I took the stairs for one night. It was not enough. Of course I went back. That's the difference between fear and compulsion. Fear can be argued with. Compulsion puts on your shoes and takes you where it wants you to go. I changed the plan. No live stream. No triumphant monologue. Just me and the elevator and a pocket full of rules. Rule 1. Do not look directly into the mirror doors at the chime of 12. That's when they lag. Rule 2. If the panel shows S, keep one hand on the rail and one on the door close button. And remember that the ocean has better things to do than make an example of you, unless you make yourself interesting. Rule 3. If the bellman offers you anything, a towel, a hand, an apology, decline. Polite, firm, no thank you. Ghosts live on transactions. At 11:59, I stood in the lobby, very still. The desk clerk's smile had been replaced by a bit of folded time. Not a frown, not concern, just a pause in the face. The security guard scrolled nothing on his phone. Somewhere to my left, a woman in perfume that remembered oranges whispered now. And a man said, "Wait," and the elevator opened its mouth. I pressed L. It took me to L. I pressed 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. They all responded like good verbs. I pressed 2 at 12, 0, 0, 0, 1. Car slid through it like water. I pressed 2 at 12, 0, 0, 31. The letter came up. S. I braced. The doors opened on the corridor again, avocado and brass, framed ceremonies, teasing a scissors that never cut. The air, there was an agreement. S04 was shut this time. S06 had its housekeeping seal intact. S02 had a cart in front of it that looked like a drawing of a cart. At the far end of the corridor, something churned slowly, like a big body rolling in a shallow bed. The water kept its distance, like a polite dog. I stepped out and put my hand against the wall for balance. It was cold in the way deep water is cold. My palm came away damp. The bellman appeared without arriving. "You shouldn't try to teach a building a new hour," he said. "It will only teach you back." "How do I leave this alone?" I asked. "I'll leave it alone. I'll tell everyone it was nothing. I'll tell them what you like," he said. "You brought your words here, and the hotel will send them back in ways you don't own. I have footage. You have recordings of yourself alone in a box," he said, without malice. "Look at them long enough, and you'll begin to believe that's all you are." I put the camera down, finally, because some part of me believed him, or because the camera had gotten heavy, or because it seemed rude to point a machine at a man whose outline insisted on C. "What is S?" I asked. "Sea level," he said, and gestured down the corridor where the carpet ended in a line of wet that couldn't manage to keep itself from advancing a little, and then retreating as if embarrassed. "And also the hour when we decide which floors exist." "You decide, the building does," he said. "We are its." He searched for a word and shrugged, as if he'd learned he was running out of them. "We help. How many of you are there?" "As many as the hotel needs. As many as guests ask for by pressing the wrong thing at the wrong time." I glanced at the framed photographs. In each one, the ribbon hung a little differently. The faces leaned more toward the camera. The light changed from warm to less. "Has this always been here?" "It arrived when the hotel needed a place to put its extra minutes," he said. "The ones that didn't fit upstairs." "The storm," I said. "People online say the storm." "The storm taught the building how to listen," he said. "We taught it how to answer." He looked past me into the elevator, and his eyes did something I couldn't name. "Go back up. Take the stairs after midnight. If you must ride, press odd. If you press even, accept what opens. And if it opens to the water, keep your hands inside the car," he said. "Do not offer your name. Do not accept a towel." "Why the towel?" "It's a contract," he said, and looked briefly pleased to have a word for something. "A gift means you belong to the hour that gives it." I stepped backward into the car. He inclined his head as if I'd done well on a quiz. The doors shut like a relieved breath. I took the stairs for a week. My calves woke up and hurt like they'd been lied to. I filmed beach sunsets, and the brunch buffet, and a room tour I could have done in my sleep, and maybe did. I did not look at the mirrored elevator doors when they opened and closed in the lobby. They became something I saw the way you see your own hands, present, useful, unspeakable. But compulsion is patient. It waits until you call it curiosity again. On the 8th night, I went down to the staff lounge on a pretext, ice machine B-roll, which is content only for people who forget that their lives are more than 9 minutes long. The lounge's bulletin board had a map of the hotel that looked like a mistake and felt like a confession. The 9th floor had once been 2 floors, 4 and 5, stacked and then compressed. The basement had been a pair of rooms called backwash and reservoir. The ocean below the building was complicated. The engineers had convinced themselves that complexity is safety. Behind the bulletin board, taped carelessly, a black and white photograph. The lobby 30 years ago, the same chandelier but shorter, the same doors but thicker, the same bellman as the one in S, hat rakish, smile neat. He looked past the camera to something he liked that was behind whoever had taken the picture. It had the quality of a man who hadn't yet been drafted by a building. I stole the photo because theft is the language you speak when polite requests won't cover it. Back in my room, I framed it with my lens and filmed a slow pan. My editor would add a moody score and a quietly ominous Ken Burns and deliver a comment magnet. But the man in the photo never quite held still. On each pass, the angle of his smile changed minutely, until it wasn't a smile at all, but the way you look when you decide to hold a door for someone who is taking too long. The elevator testing changed after that. The building had learned me. Sometimes the car would open on a floor that belonged to the blueprint. Sometimes the panel would flash S, as if my finger had pressed a letter I wasn't allowed to know. Once, at 12:11, the doors opened on a ballroom I hadn't seen and music poured in, weak and brave. The sound of a small band telling a large room that joy is practical. Couples turned in place on a drowned dance floor. The bellman stood at the far side with a tray of towels. I closed the doors and rode up to 9 with my heart beating like a foot at the edge of a wave. I started leaving notes for myself on the desk in my room. Take stairs. Do not accept anything. Odd only. If you see water, lean backward. If you see yourself in the doors and lag, look away. I dreamt of doors that only opened when you looked at them, and the way looking is sometimes an invitation. I woke with salt on my tongue and a certainty I couldn't place that someone had been standing outside my room with a tray, waiting. The manager noticed me noticing. She had the practiced face of a person who is paid to make impossible things into truths the body can live with. How's your stay? She asked at the desk one morning, as a line of vacationers negotiated sunscreen and expired coupons with the day. Educational, I said. Have you ever? We recommend the stairs after midnight, she said gently. You can use the elevator if you need it. Press odd. And if I press even? She looked not at me, but a polite spot beside my head where she could place the conversation in the building's ear. Then you have asked a question you already know the answer to. Sea level, I said. Midnight is for the sea, she said, and leaned on the words like on a rail. Please enjoy the breakfast included with your rate. It should have ended there, with an edit that suggests growth and a thumbnail that promises something worse than I can deliver, and sponsors that ward off dread with discount codes. But endings are a kind of politeness buildings do not care about, and the ocean least of all. The hour arrived again, as it does, and I was not better than myself. The elevator opened on 9 at 11:59:57 with the eagerness of a dog who has learned exactly when you come home. I stepped in and watched the doors choose their angle. I pressed 2 because I hate the part of me that listens more than the part that obeys. The panel did not flash S. The car did not move. The doors did not close. The mirror did the lag. In it, I pressed 2 again, and in reality, I hadn't moved, and in the lag, I had tilted my head in a way that looked like someone else had just come into the frame, past my shoulder behind me, smiling a little, not at me, but at what was going to happen. I hit door close. The doors remained politely apart, as if entertaining a guest I couldn't see. The air got colder. Somewhere beyond the glass walls of the atrium, a wave climbed and decided not to sit down again. "Don't," I said to no one. "Please don't." The bellman's reflection appeared beside mine. He did not exist in the car. He existed in the doors. He adjusted his cuffs the way you do when you have learned your hands again. "You keep asking," he said. "Let us answer." "What is the answer?" He looked at me, or at the mirror, and his face did something that had once been a smile. "You're already in the answer." The doors closed with a definite click, as if embarrassed for me. The car dropped, and my stomach stayed where it was for a second, like an absent-minded friend. S, the corridor, the tide at the far end. The painted sign on S0, 4 now, looped on the knob of the door across from it like a prayer flag. "Midnight is for the sea." "Okay," I told the building aloud, because sometimes you convince yourself that a loud human voice can undo a quiet, non-human intention. "Okay. I'll do it your way." "Do what?" I didn't know. But I stepped out, and the carpet took an impression of my foot, and the impression filled with water, as if the sea had eaten the shape of me and learned it quickly. "I'll tell them," I said. "I'll tell them all. Take the stairs. Press odd. Midnight is for the sea, you win." "You keep telling them," the bellman said. He stood by the cart that looked like a drawing, his hands on the handle, his mouth practicing neutrality. "They keep pressing even. What do you want from me?" "To be careful," he said, and it sounded like a blessing you deliver to people you will never see again. "Careful won't make a video." "Then make a life," he said, and his voice broke on the last word like a small wave running out of shore. Something in the building softened. The corridor air warmed enough to release a smell like linen. The tide stopped pretending to be shy about being a tide and reached the lip of the carpet with a gentle, greedy care. I ran to the elevator. The car closed with grateful haste. The ascent felt like climbing out of an apology. I took the stairs for the rest of the night, and then for many nights, in other hotels, in buildings that knew nothing of oceans, malls where the elevator music is an anesthetic for the living. I took them because every elevator at midnight is the same elevator if you're the same person stepping into it with the same lag behind your eyes. Now, months later, I draft this in a walk-up cold enough to keep milk on the sill. I deliver food on a bike when I don't have gigs, which has made my calves into creatures that eat miles and sleep upright. When an elevator door opens anywhere at midnight, I look away. In glass storefronts and train windows, I avoid my reflection at the second the hour turns. It lags then. All mirrors lag then. That's how you know you're in the answer. The hotel keeps mailing me apologies it never wrote. Glossy flyers promising new spa packages with photographs where, if you look at the far back, you can make out a bell cart in a corridor and a man with wet hair turning, not toward the camera, but toward what is going to happen. I put the flyers in a drawer with the black and white photo I stole, and sometimes take them out and look at them long enough that the paper warms. I could end with rules because rules make people feel safer about things that will not be safe. Take the stairs after midnight. Press odd if you must ride. Don't watch your reflection at the chime. If you see water, keep your hands inside the car, as if your own body might offer itself by accident. If a bellman offers you a towel, decline with the courtesy the dead deserve. If an elevator shows you a letter instead of a number, understand that language is a tide. You're already afloat, but rules won't save you from yourself. The desire to press an even number at the wrong hour is older than the hotel and wider than the sea. It is the human urge to test a boundary, to prove we are more than a notation in a building's ledger. We are. And also, when the hour comes, the building decides which parts of us belong to the land. Sometimes, late, I hear the soft ding of an elevator in a building that doesn't have one. I hear the hush of doors opening somewhere in the night behind the wall. I do not look. I feel the hard work of my calves, and I climb another step because stairs are the oldest story about how to refuse a machine. I put my hand on the rail and tell myself I don't believe in curses, only in commentary. Then I pass a mirror pane of dark shop window, black TV screen, puddle pretending sky, and for half a heartbeat my reflection lags. Behind it, for half a heartbeat more, a man in a neat old uniform stands in water that does not exist and looks at me with an expression that has learned patience from tides. He lifts an imaginary towel he will not offer. I lift an imaginary hand to refuse. We hold the shape of a transaction for a beat, and then release it, as if to say, not tonight. The elevator in my mind closes on the hour that is not for me. The ocean in my ear sets its breath to the pace of the city. In the drawer, the photograph waits, and in it, the bellman's smile leans infinitesimally toward a kind of mercy that is indistinguishable from habit. I lie down on a bed that is not a boat and count the clean seconds past midnight and pretend they are mine. And when I dream of the hotel now, the lobby is empty and well lit, and the palms perform their slow rituals, and I stand just to the side of the elevator doors while they open, and close on schedules they think they understand. And I speak softly, as if to a child with a fever. We will not press even. We will be careful. Midnight is for the sea. In the morning, with the city bright and practical, I open my laptop and edit the footage that shows an empty elevator carrying nobody to nowhere. And I watch my face learn and forget fear frame by frame. And I make a video about brunch. The comments still come, sometimes, from accounts that will vanish by noon, with the same profile picture, and the same looped advice, and the same sign-off that sounds like the tide telling shore it's one good joke. Even is never. Some hauntings aren't apparitions, they're administrative. Our third report arrived with photos of a leather-bound book that doesn't burn and a key card stamped no checkout. The building makes an offer, and if you'll comp a room for the hotel, it keeps the calls from coming. Story 3. The Night Manager's Ledger. The Briarstone never introduced itself in the day. By sunlight, it was a brochure glass atrium, mirrors that learned your face quickly, a chandelier rehearsed to be admired, so I took the job on a Tuesday afternoon and thought I'd taken a job in a building. But at night, the Briarstone introduced itself as a habit. It changed the temperature when you walked in. It pressed the air down a fraction so you could feel where the quiet slept. Charmaine trained me on rules that sounded like hospitality and read like superstition. No housekeeping after midnight, she said, tapping her pen on the day's audit. No comps for the pool. If the red phone by the pool rings, answer on the third ring only. Never the first, never the second. What happens if I answer early? I asked, because it felt like a joke she wanted me to help finish. You don't, she said, not smiling. And we don't ask. There were other rules printed on white paper and placed in a blue folder with the patience of policy. Balance the folios, settle the POS, run the night audit, print packets for morning managers, check the cameras hourly. The kind of rules that give your body a staircase to climb till dawn. The ledger wasn't a rule. It lived in the safe like a memory you're not sure you want. Leather swollen from humidity. Corners green. No title on the spine. When I lifted it the first time, the room lost a degree, as if acknowledging an old friend who had been ill. Night Manager's Ledger, Charmaine said, casual, and did not open it. It has habits. Don't let it make you late on the audit. There are ways you learn to listen for machines. Refrigerators have a grudge sound. Elevators keep time like metronomes, teaching patience. HVAC breathe with faint insomnia. That first night, after the middle-aged couple in 712 pitched their civilized argument, and the last corporate straggler asked if the bar was doing any miracles, the building's sounds fell into place. The pool room ticked. The ice machine in 9 hummed the note it had chosen 20 years ago. And from the safe behind my knee, the ledger exhaled. I opened it with the guilty care of someone who finds a sealed envelope not addressed to anyone alive. It wasn't Charles Dickens or a hotel Bible. It was a log full of names and check-ins, notes in tidy hands about extra pillows, allergies, a particular guest's habit of turning the thermostat to 62 no matter the season. Then the handwriting changed, tighter, looped, like a teacher who uses a red pen. The entries became less about people and more about hours. 0113 pool open to guests. Week later, one incident. No family, no name. Rules adopted. 0222 if the red phone rings, answer on the third. 0303 complaints from the hour. Rule, we house what hurts. The pool phone rang at 302. One long metallic ring that tasted like batteries. Again at 30220. The second ring climbed my spine and paused at my neck. I watched the seconds on the PMS screen crawl. On the third ring I went, because my feet knew a rule before my mouth did. Front desk, I said into a handset made of plastic and habit. A hiss that belonged to plumbing touched my ear. Not static, not voice, pressure. Something moved through tile and copper and rose until it could put a hand on the inside of my skull and say hello by making me very aware of blood. Front desk, I said again, softer. Nothing human answered. But the pool surface on camera practiced becoming a mirror and failed. It puckered as if a face pressed from beneath just once and then forgot why it had tried. The ledger had a line waiting for me when I came back. In a hand not mine, in wet red. Good. Who writes that? I asked the air, because the lobby was a good listener. I looked for a pen left out, for any trick I would later feel foolish for missing. Nothing, but when I pressed my finger to the line, the red smudged like something living. On the second night, the ledger began to ask. 0149, set water on 512 center of nightstand. Exact center. 0203, reprint key for 611. Place at desk. 0227, do not send housekeeping to 409. Send towels. The hotel taught me its ways easily. I set a glass in the exact center, and the light in 512 stopped stuttering on camera. I printed and placed, and the man in 611 didn't phone to curse a key he'd demagnetized by keeping it posed like a prize against his cell. I took towels to 409, and the woman opened the door, crying with embarrassment. I swear there's someone in the shower, she whispered. But my husband's asleep. Towels, I said gently, because towels are apologies that dry. Call me if you need anything. Back at the desk, the ledger wrote good and meant you did it right. You can get drunk on that. Good becomes a door you run to hold, a bell you learn the pitch of. On the third night, the ledger changed tones. 0244, comp a room. For who? I asked, because I am good at asking the kind of question that makes trouble sound like administration. The red hand waited long enough to be dramatic and wrote, for the building. What do I comp with? I said. We don't comp rooms. Sleep, it wrote, neat as policy. So I gave sleep, the way you give bone marrow to a stranger. I stayed past dawn in a chair built to be sat in for minutes, not hours. And when my stamp hand found my wrist, it pressed an ink there that did not wash off. Hexagonal, deep water blue, in-house. Charmaine squinted at the mark and looked at a point over my shoulder instead of my eyes. You don't have to be a hero, she said, kind in a way people are when they know they can't rescue you. Take your breaks. I'm fine, I said, the way men say fine, when they've floated past common sense and into arrangement. The ledger wrote, good. After that, the book started to add names that weren't names. 0111 Saturday leaking into Sunday, please hold. 0226, the highway wants a shower. 0303, the hour since the pool went inside requires signage. I stood in 421, turned on the shower, and let it run until the mirror gave back a version of me softened by steam. The room filled with the smell of rain on warm asphalt. The vent exhaled a sound like a car downshifting a long hill. A thank you, maybe. I hung a hand-lettered quiet after midnight in the back hall, and the hour since the pool went inside didn't make the exit sign hum like a toothache. The building rewarded me with little mercies. Guests praised the calm, night manager in surveys, a couple whose fights, like the hallway, found a way to tell their story quieter. A child who cried habitually at 3 a.m., slept through, and her father left me a note. Thank you for the quiet. The ledger wrote good in loops that started to look like my own hand, and I pressed my thumb to the curve of the G because it felt like touching the place where a nerve attaches to a muscle. On my 7th shift, the hotel sent me a photograph that wasn't a photograph. It was a Polaroid tucked between 2 ledger pages. The sealed corridor behind the banquet rooms, a door with no numbers, a blank where brass should be. I flipped another page and found a notation in fountain pen, a voice from another hand. We had no 13th floor until we did. I closed the book because another story was trying to open, and I didn't want to be rude to it, and because a pool camera was showing the water practicing faces again. Chair eyes from accounting brought me a donut at 3:00, like a priest bringing communion to the wrong church. You look like you're adding numbers that aren't in the reports, she said. Eat something from a kitchen. Thank you, I said, and meant it. She left, and the ledger wrote good again in red, and it felt like theft to enjoy both. On my 10th night, the building decided we were serious. The automatic doors learned the breadth of my shoulders. When I tried to leave after shift, the doors opened exactly wide enough to touch both arms, and then stopped like a mother blocking a toddler from traffic. We'll mail your key, Charmaine had said kindly when I'd accidentally called quitting, going on days. She was right. A week later, in my apartment slot, an envelope arrived, plain as a bill. Inside, a heavy key card embossed with the words "No checkout" so faintly you had to tilt it to read. I put the card in my wallet, and the room cooled the way the lobby did when the building listened harder. I tried to burn the ledger on night 12 because men try fire when they think they're elegant about it. In the banquet alley, with a box of matches meant for centerpieces, and with the kind of caution you use around a sleeping infant, I held a match under one of its swollen corners. The page drank the heat like a mouth. Not burn, not blacken, not even curl. Damp ripened up, a smell like rain finally arriving, and the red hand wrote as if it had waited for my experiment. Ask again. What would release me? I said, voice gone boyish and exasperated because I was tired, and the book had me speaking in liturgy. Comp a room, it wrote, for the building. What room? Nights. Ones that don't end. You can't have those, I said, stubborn as a child arguing with the ocean. The ledger did not bother to disagree. It let me tell myself no. It let the red phone take the 3rd ring in the pool and not insist. It is the gentlest cruelty of the house, the way it lets you sign your own consent. Meyer arrived when the book decided I was done being alone. She came for training in sneakers that apologized to their own squeak, and with a notebook already half full, because some people feel safer if they pre-fill the future. I heard you're the one who knows the overnights, she said, offering a dry hand and the kind of smile that has margin notes. We run reports, count drawers, argue with printers, ignore a lot of lobby ghosts, I said. We don't send housekeeping after midnight. We never comp the pool. If the red phone rings, 3rd ring. And that? She asked, eyeing the ledger with soft disdain. She was too smart to dismiss things outright. She liked to test first. It writes back, I said. Pretend it doesn't, and do what it says anyway. At 2:17, the ledger wrote her in. The trainee, tell her the rules. Don't show the ledger. I showed her the ledger because it had already said her name in the only grammar buildings speak, a neat red pen that feeds on you politely. It's a prank, she said, not convinced. It's the building, I said, convinced and wishing I weren't. At 2:44, it asked again, comp a room. For the building, I said under my breath. For who else? The ledger wrote without moving. What do we comp it with? Meyer asked. Sleep, I said. Mine, why yours? It's stamped, I said, showing her the hexagon. It doesn't want yours yet. Yet, she repeated, and wrote it will want mine in her notebook, because she is the kind of person who does not let an idea arrive unannounced. When I woke with my hand on the bell and a thin red stain on the pad, there was a new line written in my own loops. We house what hurts. Underneath, in smaller script, we house who houses it. I tried to take a day shift after that, and failed the way you fail at not thinking of something. The building can smell when you're pretending. It made the elevators a little mean. It taught the automatic doors my full name. It sent corporate to inspect the way the hotel breathes. He arrived with his sympathy ironed into his suit. He called the fire panel legacy equipment, and the ice machine on 9 noise pollution, and the red phone unacceptable liability. He looked at the ledger and smiled like you smile at a child who calls a shoebox a spaceship. Manual logs are nice, he said, but let's keep the night audit digital. The book writes, I said, not to argue but to record. People write in books, he said. Install cameras over the desk. Accountability. Cameras didn't help. They showed me alone in a lobby, head bent over a book, lips moving the way lips do when prayers are whispered without believing. The videos were the building's idea of a joke. The week after corporate left to upgrade something somewhere that never misbehaves, the ledger asked for a bigger thing. 0103, meet me in 511. Bring nothing. I went because I had learned how to walk toward a rule. The room smelled like weather that hasn't decided. On the nightstand, a small spiral notebook, the kind housekeepers keep to survive, Nina, 1987, written on the cover in neat, careful block print. Inside, lists. Extra pillows for back injuries. Mr. Thorne drinks black tea. Leave the kettle. Honeymooners in 506. Cry loudly in the shower. Leave extra towels. At the back, a label maker tape, crooked. We house what hurts. I put the notebook back and shut the drawer, and the bed gave a tiny sigh the way mattresses do when the building relaxes, because you got the answer right. Back at the desk, the ledger wrote a different word. Not good this time. Better. I got drunk on that too. I started writing my own rules in the back of the book in my own blue. Rule: when 409 sees someone in the shower, do not argue with the water. Send towels. Rule: if a wake-up call is requested, ask which side of waking they mean. Rule: if a guest asks for a room that faces nothing, give them one. Rule: if a door appears that isn't a door, it isn't for you. The ledger underlined which side and drew a discreet check by faces nothing. Polite approval, the kind that makes men into volunteers. We had a fire blip at 2:12 on a Thursday. The panel stuttered, and then embarrassed itself into silence. Smoke slid under doors with courtesy. We emptied 9 by hand the way you empty a church, gently, telling people where to put their hands, reminding them the stairs are only stairs. The night manager brought out a clipboard with lines we didn't recognize, and 2 extra columns labeled memory and lost and found. "Sign for them," she said, and her voice was the kind of tired that reorganizes itself into usefulness. We did. We wrote names that weren't ours, and the building steadied. Loops that had been threatening to repeat lost their courage. And in the morning, a professionally printed placard appeared in the break room that said this property takes guest safety seriously, and below it, in handwriting, so does the property. The ledger started leaving me love notes that weren't love. 0137 MS. Bell paid in cash, asks for a room with no glass. 0209 Mr. No one wants a wake-up that does not advance time. 0333 The highway, thank you. Maya worked 2 nights alone and came back with a smile that looked like a person who had taken a test written by a building and passed. The ledger wrote good twice in a row, like pride. Then it tested her. 0249 Compa room. She wrote no under it fiercely, and the N cut the paper. The hotel's lights inhaled, the doors narrowed by a finger, the POS screen froze mid-some, gentle reminders that there are ways to argue you shouldn't try. The pool phone rang once, twice. Maya picked up on the third, because I had taught her not to make noise before the hour finished its ritual. "Tell me to stop," the ledger wrote, and she said stop. And the lights remembered how to make light, and the POS counted, and the door widened, and she looked at me triumphant and a little scared. The book wrote good, and then wrote ask again to itself, because buildings enjoy rehearsals more than outcomes. We worked within that new grammar stop and ask again for weeks. The ledger asked us to comp. We asked it to stop. It asked us to ask again. We did. It asked again. And we let it. You can build a life from polite arguments. Some nights were quiet in the way well-run hotels are quiet, noise administered, disturbances absorbed. Some nights, the building sent me things I didn't know what to do with. Towels new to inventory, heavy linen, with a border that predated the logo. Door tags from another era that read fire drill complete on one side and do not disturb on the other in fonts that never met our brand guidelines, but belonged to us anyway, the way bones belong to your body, whether you like their shape or not. We used the tags when the fire panel refused practice. We hung do not disturb when someone upstairs slept the way the building asked us to protect. I made the mistake of taking the hand-painted do not disturb please from 950 knob and replacing it with a corporate tag. The ribbon slid like a throat. The corporate tag fell to the carpet like a fish. If you open the door, you take the sign. Wrote a note on the pillow in the same patient hand. I closed the door with a kindness that wasn't mine and put the hand-painted sign back. Later, at home, another hand-painted sign hung itself on my apartment door. I slept like a person who believes in spells. The red phone in the pool rang less the more I did right. The pool practiced faces on camera less when I set water at exact centers and printed keys early for the man who always demagnetized his card by keeping it too close to his phone. Guests wrote thank you for the quiet on comment cards, and I pinned them on the corkboard the way you hang diplomas. The building taught me its jokes. If I forgot to ask which side of waking, somebody would show up in the lobby at 2:59, eyelids heavy, saying the wake-up never came. The ledger would write call returned with the cruelty of accuracy and underline it twice. If I sent housekeeping after midnight, a vacuum would start itself in a stairwell at 1:12, and the entire hotel would hold its breath. The ledger would write we asked you not to in small, neat letters that made me feel like a child at a chalkboard. If I answered the pool phone on the second ring, the third ring would arrive inside my ear. The water on camera would lift a fraction the way a stricken person lifts their head to ask if you're sure, and the ledger would not write anything at all. The silence worse than red, and all the while, the hexagon on my wrist faded into my skin until it wasn't ink but a seam. The last night came the way a last anything does slantwise. Then suddenly, the ledger wrote a line so simple it was a trick. 0303, comp a room for you. For me, I asked the lobby, which had become a person I trusted. Yes, leave your name. The red strokes were shy. You keep it. We will house what hurts. We will house who houses it. My name is not a hurt, I said. That depends on how long you've carried it, the ledger wrote, and that was unkind and true. Charmaine's warning came back, half policy and half love. If you need to leave, leave. You can always come back. The doors narrowed to my shoulders and then stayed wide, as if listening for the kind of person I had decided to be. I took a ballpoint and wrote my name on the line where names live. The letters looked strange, like a person just out of the pool looks like a recipient of their own skin. The ledger breathed, and the red hand wrote good in loops that were not mine, and were. The automatic doors opened to exactly the width of leaving. The building did not dim the lights, or sound a bell, or lift the pool into a face. It did not ask again. It let me go, because that is another of its tricks. It lets you think you got your way, so the part of you that needs to be the person who decides can walk upright. I walked down the steps into a morning that tasted like tap water. The street did not feel like a hallway for the first time in months. The heavy no checkout card warmed next to my license as if relieved. I turned back, as people do when they expect a curtain call and find they want it. Through the glass, in the reflection of the lobby self, a night clerk stood with his hand on the ledger. For half a second, he was me. The line of his back had my ache. The towel on his shoulder lay like a stole. Then he lifted his head, and the motion lagged by half a beat, and the next half beat belonged to someone else. I put my palm on the glass. The building put its cool on mine. The ledger wrote inside my skull without ink. Audit complete. Do not disturb. I went home and slept without the towel. At 3:03, the wind at my window made a sound that could have been the pool phone, and I did not answer because the building had hired a new voice to pick up the third ring. In the morning, an envelope waited. Inside, a postcard of the Briarstone, the year the pool went indoor, on the back, neat red, a sentence that could be mercy or instruction, depending on where you stand. We house what hurts. I keep the postcard tucked in the mirror by the door where I see it, and decide how much of me to take into the world. I still walk past the hotel on the way to the river sometimes. The lobby glass keeps perfect posture. The palms gesture without making demands. If I catch my reflection at the right angle, it lags by a beat the way all mirrors do at ours building's own. The rules stay with you. I still set water at the exact center of my nightstand, and my sleep learns the trick. I don't send housekeeping after midnight, even when the only housekeeping is me trying not to empty the dishwasher loudly while the person I love sleeps. If a phone rings, I answer on the third. If a door appears where it shouldn't, I ignore it until it forgets me. If a guest in my life says they see someone in the shower, I hand them a towel and don't argue with water. Sometimes I hear the sound of a ledger turning its own page. It's faint, like paper deciding what story it belongs to. Sometimes a building in another city breathes wrong around 2:44, and I feel the hexagon itch, and I say stop and wait for ask again, and give it once, and then stop again. Sometimes I dream I'm setting a glass in the exact center of a nightstand, and the glass never finds the center because the room is not a square but a shore. I do not go back. That is my rule, unprinted. The Briarstone keeps a space on the key rack that belongs to my name. The ledger keeps a line for me that door handles cannot find. The building will add a floor if it has to keep me if I let it. I won't. It is a good hotel. It houses what hurts. It taught me to be careful with hours, to treat them like guests you carry in your pocket. I learned how to leave without slamming the door. And if you find yourself at a front desk at 3 a.m. and the pool phone is practicing the third ring and the safe is breathing, take the book and open it. Read what it asks. When it writes comp a room, ask for who and then wait while the building pretends not to care. When it writes for the building, decide whether you can give it your sleep and still have a name in the morning. If a trainee stands beside you, write which side of waking in their notebook and underline faces nothing for the next time a guest asks for a view that doesn't reflect them back. If corporate arrives with a suit and liability, let him sign his papers and let the building sign its own. Answer on the third ring. Set the glass at the exact center. Say stop when the ledger asks for more than it should, and say ask again when you can afford to be generous. Put towels outside 409 when the person in the shower isn't one of you. Don't send housekeeping after midnight. Never comp the pool. And if the ledger writes 0303, comp a room. For you, don't be brave. Be accurate. Decide. Leave your name where the book can keep it, or keep it yourself, and learn how to sleep in a world where not every building wants you. The Briarstone is a good hotel. It keeps its promises. It learned mine. We taught each other where to put things. That is all a ledger is, a record of where you put the night, and whether the night was gentle enough to make a person out of you by morning. Audit complete. Do not disturb. Not every ghost rattles chains. Some leave a handwritten request and expect the staff to understand grammar. A sign that followed a housekeeper home. A room that sleeps for more than one person. The rule becomes a liturgy. Do not disturb me, disturb them. Please, Story 4. Do not disturb. I've worked at the Garnet Shore long enough to know the building by skin and breath. The way the ducted air changes temperature when someone angry steps into the lobby. The way carpet holds the outline of a suitcase long after wheels have moved on. The way door tags, those little cardboard commandments, are obeyed more faithfully than any law. Every guest thinks their do not disturb is a private fortress. They don't see the whole floor rearrange around that rectangle of politeness. The sign that started this wasn't corporate stock. It was handmade. Stiff white card, edges softened by use, letters painted slowly in black, as patient as prayer. Do not disturb, please. The ribbon was red, not our brand ribbon, but the exact shade of a mouth that asks nicely. It hung on 915 3 days. We documented, we escalated per policy: knock, second knock, call the desk, call again, wellness check with security, key in. On day 1, the door hummed like a seashell. On day 2, we heard breathing at ear level, too even to blame on pipes. On day 3, there was nothing at all, and that was worse. The night manager, Rahim, turned the key as gently as if he were waking a baby. Inside, bed made, glass of water half drunk, bathroom mirror fogged then wiped in a single careless sweep. A note on the pillow, in the same hand as the sign. If you open the door, you take the sign. We closed the door. I hung the sign back because I'm the kind of person who believes paper can be a contract. I'm Alina, housekeeping lead by title, linen mathematician by practice. I can fold a queen flat one-handed in a corridor with a vacuum whining and 3 guests arguing about shuttle times. I know where the spare pillowcases hide when laundry is late, and how to make a stain apologize and leave. And I know, with the whole length of my arms, that hotel is a machine for closing doors softly. So I left 915 alone, and we partitioned noise like triage. Kids in 917 got earplugs before they knew they needed them. The bachelor party, down on 6, got an extra cart of ice, prematurely melted. We swapped the squeaky housekeeping wheel for a quiet one before daybreak. The corridor obeyed the polite gravity of that hand-painted please. The sign followed me home on the 7th night. I swear I didn't take it. It clung to the housekeeping cart handle like static. And then, when I wheeled through the staff entrance, it wasn't on the hook anymore. When I let myself into my apartment, it was looped around my knob, red ribbon tied in a small child's bow. My building is old brick with radiators that hiss and neighbors who fight with their hands, not their voices. I'd worked a double. I didn't have the fiber to be spooked. I hung the thing on my inside knob, the way you might hang a kindergarten art project out of duty, and slept like a stripped bed. In the morning, the sign had more words. Same patient brush, smaller letters beneath please. Welcome staff. Silent floor. We have silent floors at the Garnet, not officially. Weddings, VVIP. Hungover pharmaceuticals, reps who've bought a block of privacy with points. We don't call them silent. We say respecting requests. But the sign on my door called it by its true name, and the truth of it sat on my kitchen table while I drank hotel coffee at home and stared. I took the sign back to work under my sweater like contraband. The ribbon tickled my collarbone when I clocked in. Mrs. R1 asked for extra hangers In 908, said Lanny, junior housekeeper, eyes still bright from 6 hours of sleep and mercy. You okay? You look like the hotel moved. Just an early morning, I said, because there are parts of the job you can't delegate, like weird. 915 still wore its twin handmade tag. The paint had thickened, as if someone had gone over the letters with a fresh layer, making the please rise from the page like a vein. The air before that door had weight. I put my palm against it and felt a sleeping pressure behind the wood, not a draft, not HVAC, something with its own rhythm. I didn't press my ear to listen. I'm not reckless. I've made a life of being almost reckless and stopping 1 inch shy. The phone on my hip buzzed at 2:58 a.m. We keep our cordless set to vibrate at night. The front desk patched a call to me because I'd been handling 915. I brought the handset to my ear and heard air. Not static. Air being convinced to be sound by a throat that had forgotten the trick. If you open the door, the not voice said, you take the sign. I took it, I said before I thought about pronouns and what they commit you to. I have it. Then you know the job, it breathed. What job? Do not disturb me, it said, less command than grammar. Then, after a beat, kinder, disturb them. Across the hall, 914's door opened a crack. A woman in sleep braids and t-shirt squinted out. Everything okay? Sorry, I said automatically, because apology is a towel, and you can put it between anyone and anything. The next shift, I changed how I moved. It wasn't superstition. It was choreography. I learned to wrap the vacuum cord so it didn't clap against the cart like a castanet. I mapped every clicky tile and rolled the wheels so they didn't land on them. I coached the rookies out of their habit of letting the latch hit the jam. I taught 6 new kinds of whisper for hallway hellos. We swapped ice buckets at noon, not midnight. We timed the dryer door downstairs so it wouldn't slam during nap hours. The building noticed the exit sign hum lost a frequency that used to needle. The corridor lights warmed 0.5 Kelvin, which is a temperature only the exhausted measure. I could have left the story there. A housekeeper finds a haunted sign, becomes a better housekeeper. But neat endings are brochure talk. The sign on my apartment door split itself on the 7th night, somewhere between my sleep and my waking. Right down the middle of the please, not torn, not damaged. It made itself too. One side still said, do not disturb with its square, printed certainty. The other side said, welcome staff. Silent floor. I hung both halves, 2 small commandments facing each other like siblings who won't admit they are alike. At 2:11 that morning, the neighbor at the end of my hall, the one with the heavy feet and lighter lies, started throwing a fight. Not shouting, not words. He doesn't waste words on people, just impact. The thud of a couch grunting, a glass refusing physics then obeying, a drawer learning it is merely wood. I got up like you get up when a baby has stopped crying and you cannot trust the quiet. My hand touched the inside knob to open, and my red ribbon tugged me back. It wasn't a pull. It was a suggestion. Around the corner, the fight stopped. The building exhaled, or else I did. The next day, the sign had changed again. The welcome side had grown a new line, so faint I might have imagined it, if not for the habitual patience in the brushwork. Disturbance by request only. Are you okay? Asked Rahim, night manager, when I brought him the sign and the story. He's young enough to have learned that listening is a tool, not a burden. You want to take a day? I want to hang this on 915, I said. Corporate's in next week, he said, a little grim. Regional audit. They won't love individualism. He ran a finger across the hand-painted letters. They really don't love handwriting. He wasn't wrong. When corporate arrived, suit like a rulebook, smile like a refund, they walked 9 with clipped admiration and stopped mid-sentence at 915. What is this? The regional manager said, pinching the sign off its knob like a hair in soup. Guest sign, I said, neutral. Non-standard, he said. Liability. We'll remove it and replace it with logoed product. Please don't, I said before my training could staple my lips. It's part of the room. He smiled. On some faces, a smile is an apology. On his, it was permission to do whatever came after. He slipped the tag into his leather folio as if he had confiscated a threat. We'll standardize, he said. He checked into the resort across the causeway because the Garnet Shore is in the weeds at audit time. At 2:50, according to his own notes later, a hand-painted tag appeared on his suite door. Do not disturb block letters, please. On the pillow. If you open the door, you take the sign. He cut his stay short, citing guest experience. He left my hands red with restraint. The sign reappeared on 915 before his Uber made the on-ramp. The ribbon was smug. After that, the building began to ask for specific things, not in words you could record, in coincidences that made choreography out of chance. A choir group arrived at 1:30 a.m., shoes squeaking like rubber ducks, 93 teenagers with bottled water and loud whispering. Their rooms had been assigned to 9 because a reservationist bought herself a quiet day by placing her chaos on our silent night. The corridor bristled. 915's cardstock swelled faintly in humidity. My phone buzzed without ringing. Do not disturb me. Disturb them. I walked to the ice machine, unplugged it, plugged it back in. Unplugged. It hummed, hiccuped, dumped a load with a sound like hail being taught to march. The kids laughed, then glanced at their chaperones, then at me, then at each other, then SSSHH'd each other, as if the hushing were their own idea. The hallway fell into a complicity that sounds like sleep. 915 stayed a door. 3 nights later, a wedding banqueted its way past midnight. The DJ's contract said end 12:00 with a scrawled addendum by popular demand. At 12:08, my red ribbon warmed in my pocket. I went to the ballroom, turned down the highs on the board without asking, and the room's sharpness softened. The DJ glared. What are you doing? We have a silent floor, I said. Whatever that means, he muttered. In the glass wall of the atrium, lightning inked the ocean. The causeway turned to a string of pearls, each car's headlight a drop suspended in dark. I stood by the soundboard like substitute authority and pointed to the sign I'd set on the bar. Quiet hours 12:06 a.m. by request. We don't have permission to put up notices without corporate. Sometimes you ask forgiveness from the walls. Sometimes you ask forgiveness from a person who doesn't sleep in the building. The walls answer faster. After one more song, the bride cried, which is contractually obligated in a life like hers. We shut down clean. In the stairwell between 4 and 5, we ran a vacuum without a bag's steady, white noise. The building took the sound into itself and exhaled it up through the chandelier. 915's please cooled. The red ribbon eased. The next morning, 3 comment cards materialized in my linen cart. No handwriting, just block letters like corporate template, filled with guest sincerity. Thank you for the quiet. 1 from 403, 1 from 728, and 1 from nowhere at all. A room that doesn't exist on any floor plan. 915. When the audit team returned, they noticed the cards, but not the 3rd floor plan number that shouldn't be. Good guest feedback, the regional said, as if he'd discovered the quiet, trademarked it, and would invoice us for our use. Nights arranged themselves into a discipline. The sign on my apartment door taught my neighbors something they didn't know they could learn: to pad barefoot between midnight and 6. The building I lived in adopted the phrase silent floor by rumor. The kid with the skateboard learned to carry it. The man with heavy feet learned to walk like a verb that doesn't need adverbs. At work, 915's tag grew a gloss, like skin that has been sleeping well. The please acquired depth until the letters were not painted on, but grown. On the back, a new line appeared, so faint I read it only when morning light found the fiber of the stock. Thank you. I tried once a week to retire the handmade sign and put up corporate stock, to prove to myself I wasn't superstitious, that I was still an employee and not a priest. Each time the branded tag slid off the knob like a fish, flipping, and flopped face down on carpet until I picked it up. Each time the hand-painted sign settled against the brass with a small inevitability. I stopped trying. Arguments are noise. Then the request changed. Not a whisper, not a tug, an announcement. The hand-painted tag wore fresh ink that smelled like water and then like nothing. Beneath please, a new line in a hand deliberately left-handed, letters going shyly uphill. Not enough. I set my palm against the door and felt the pressure of a sleeping thing turned restless. I understand a bed too warm, a room too loud. I understand not enough like a recipe missing salt. I walked the hallway and took notes that would become doctrine. The rules wrote themselves. If 915 says not enough, the whole floor becomes staff. Disturbance by request only. Make the rest of the building loud enough to give this one room the shape of quiet. We deployed what we had. Security did their laps soft-footed but visible. The night manager placed earplug baskets on 9 and 7. The ribbon on my tag multiplied, tied around the cellophane like a subtle flag. We ran the lobby fountain an hour late. We wheeled the vacuum to the stairwell and made white noise like prayer. The DJ down the coast didn't cross the causeway because the rain asked him not to. The roof decided to be roof. At 1:17 a.m., 915's cardboard went cool. I pressed my ear to the door for the first time since the first night and heard the absence of a scream. I thanked the door anyway because it matters. Corporate sent a new regional, younger suit, better manners, walked 9 with us, and stopped at 915 like a man approaching a tiger he's been told is part of the tour. Authenticity, he said, and put both hands into his pockets. We can respect individual touches as a brand pillar. Thank you, I said, and hung my sign back after he'd left, because I don't need help to do what a building already decided is right. The last time I took the hand-painted tag off 915, the knob turned with it. I don't know why. Maybe buildings change their minds like people do, abruptly, then retroactively adding reasons. The latch withdrew, as if embarrassed to have been part of the story. Inside, a room arranged around absence, bed made, hollowed a little in the shape of a person who has slept long and correctly. Curtain hang that looked like a lake drawn by a child. 2 glasses, one half drunk, one waiting. The air was not perfumed. It had the temperature of someone's wrist, and yet sound had no permission there. My breathing went small without me deciding it. The soles of my shoes forgot to squeak. On the desk, a stack of blank cardstock, a coil of red ribbon, a brush that had learned one word perfectly and was resting. The top card had 3 painted letters formed and a space left for the 4th. Plea. The truth found me like déjà vu that had been waiting for my mouth. The sign doesn't say please because the sleeper is polite. It says please because the building is asking for your help. I left the door open. I stood outside a moment like a lifeguard at the edge of a still pool, not because I expect trouble, but because trouble sometimes expects you. The corridor remembered how to be corridor. The exit sign hummed a key that tasted like vitamins. We added a line to the housekeeping manual, printed in a font that enforces inevitability. Respect quiet hours 12:06. Do not remove handmade signage. Disturbance by request only. I slipped the page into the plastic binder in the break room. It looked like the ocean, pretending to be paper. Lanny read it and said, "So this is church now." I said, "This is plumbing." And we laughed because they are the same job in a building that learned to speak. It didn't make us saints. We forgot sometimes. A new hire vacuumed outside 915 at 2:04 because she didn't know, and I had stepped away to fetch more tea sachets. And the sign knocked back against the door with a hollow thump that sounded like a heart, and the vacuum stopped without anyone touching it. We wrote a post-it. No vacuums on 9 after midnight, underlined twice, and put it where the vacuums sleep. A honeymooner in 907 called to say someone was standing in her shower. I sent towels without commentary because water hates argument. A man in 903 complained there was no view. I gave him a room that faces a blank wall, and he wrote a 5-star review titled "Best Sleep of My Life." Housekeeping is a science of making shape for rest. Some nights, I brought the sign home and hung the welcome staff side out. My kids learned to tiptoe because it made them giggle, not because fear taught them. My wife learned to take her calls on the balcony after midnight and to see it not as sacrifice, but as a game the building plays with us. How quiet can you be and still be heard? The neighbor with heavy feet left flowers on our mat. Small wild ones stand awkward and proud like new rules. Sometimes, late, the phone in my pocket buzzes without actual buzzing, and I hear the corridor exhale, and I know 915 is making a request it won't phrase. I go and I do the little things. I move a cart 2 inches so it won't tap the jamb. I rehang a do not disturb straight so the door believes it. I pick up a room service plate that somebody left in front of 913 and that has been hot breathing garlic into the night. The sleeping pressure behind 915 wood acknowledges me by not changing. That's all I want as proof, the stable tone of someone else's breathing. Twice a year, the Garnet tests the fire alarm at night because insurance demands theater. The panel always stutters at first, remembering. The 9th floor remembers worst. We learned to hold the stairwell door and wedge it without being scolded by the letter do and do not block stamped into the wall. When smoke arrives politely, we answer loudly. We hand out tags professionally printed on red, fire drill complete on one side, do not disturb on the reverse, and guests love them the way people love a souvenir of danger they didn't have to feel. On nights like that, 915 keeps its breath. The building has its ending rehearsed. Once, because men are wired to test, I tried to sleep without the sign on my apartment door. I told myself a story about control and superstition, and how habit is just a shortcut to weakness. At 2:03, the radiator coughed and didn't stop. The neighbor's tap became a drummer. A car alarm 2 blocks away learned a second voice. I hung the welcome staff side out, and the city remembered how to be a room. What lives in 915? I don't ask. I remain unheroic. Some stories don't want a hero, they want a caretaker. I am good at being that. I can stack towels in a symmetry that makes people breathe slower. I can hold a silence with my whole body. I can disturb the right person instead of the wrong one without choosing cruelty. If you want a monster, if you want a body on the bed, wrong podcast, wrong hotel. Our haunting is etiquette. You think that sounds soft. It isn't. Politeness is the heaviest furniture. It takes 3 to move and a 4th to tell everybody where to set it down. It will crush you if you pretend you're done when you're halfway. Now and then, I open 915 because doors are for using, and because you cannot bind a thing unless you know whether it breathes. The bed has a dip in the mattress, in the shape of a shoulder blade. The glasses trade places like lovers. Sometimes the brush on the desk has dried with paint in its bristles, the color of my ribbon. My hands itch to finish the word plea, but I haven't, and I won't. The room can write its own requests. If you visit us, and you find a hand-painted tag looped on your doorknob that you don't remember hanging, don't be afraid. It doesn't mean you did something wrong. It means the building trusts you to help. Hang it the way it wants to hang. If a noise starts down the hall, add your SHHH to ours. If your neighbor laughs too loudly at 12:03, disturb them gently. If you feel a fight turning into a storm, move it to the balcony and let the ocean chew it into sea foam. That's all we ask. That's all the room asks. As for me, I go on. I clock in at 10 and out at 6, though time at the Garnet has learned a better grammar. I roll cards, I teach rookies, I leave extra pillows before they're requested. I carry the red ribbon in my pocket like a spare artery. I listen to doors. It is an ordinary holiness, not the kind that glows, the kind that wipes the mirror so the face behind it doesn't startle. Sometimes guests write thank you for the quiet on their comment cards. I pin those to the corkboard and pretend they will stay. Sometimes the cards are blank except for the room number, and sometimes the room number is wrong, and sometimes it's 915, which isn't a joke because jokes require laughter, and this is not funny. On my day off, I walk the city early and watch storefront glass learn to be mirrors. I see my reflection lag half a heartbeat, and I forgive it. At home, the sign on my door has rejoined. It says do not disturb again, with please grown deep. From some angles, under the right light, if you stand very close, you can read a faint line beneath the please, where the card's fiber caught the brush and held it like a breath. Welcome, staff. The hotel taught me to be better at my job. The job taught me to be softer with the hours that aren't mine. The room taught me that some requests look like commands, and some commands ask politely. And that please is a spell. I don't know who sleeps in 915. And if you think I'm lying when I say I don't want to know, ask anyone who has ever hushed a crying child at 3 in the morning without turning on a light. Sometimes the kindest act is to keep the door between the world and the person who needs it, to stand there and be boring and patient and solid, to disturb everyone else instead. If you need a rule to take with you, take this. When a sign says do not disturb and adds please in a hand that never shakes, believe it. Do not remove handmade signage. Disturbance by request only. And if the sign follows you home, hang it. Sleep under it. Teach your hallway to whisper. Remember that etiquette is heavier than fear and easier to carry if we live together. When people ask me whether the garnet is haunted, I tell them the truest thing I know. Our building learned to say please and mean it. We learned to hear it. That's enough. When a hotel remembers the worst night of its life, it will make you rehearse the ending until you get it right. A 9th floor that loops, shoe squeak, ice hum, laugh with no mouth unless staff hold the door, count the names, and sign for the ones the building can't forget. If the alarm won't speak, you do. If smoke arrives politely, answer loudly. This is how they taught it to sleep. Story 5, the 9th floor repeater. At 1:57 a.m., the hotel pulled taut like a drum. I'd been here 3 nights, enough to memorize the chime of the elevators, and the way the ice machine on 9 held a single note, the way a monk holds a vow. And I still wasn't used to how the building arranged itself at that hour. Air conditioners hushed as if someone had put a hand over their mouths. Carpets stopped pretending to be soft and showed their real job, which is to dampen 100 small disobediences. Somewhere beneath us, parking garage exhaled a thermal sigh that made the columns sound like old bones learning a new weather. I stood in the 9th floor elevator lobby with 2 paper cups of coffee, one for me, one for Jules, and counted my team with the reflex you develop when you've shepherded people through rollouts, outages, and rooms that smell like yesterday's decisions. Jules had her hair skewered up with 2 pencils, a look that made her appear permanently half-finished with something brilliant. Ella leaned against the wall as if she'd been printed there by a designer with a thing for efficient posture. The contractors, Cy and Penny, had their doors propped like cats. We were in town to migrate a client's back office to a tool my company sells with conviction. By day, we taught people to move their habits into software. By night, we slept in a mid-market business hotel with a lobby bar that overperformed at pretending it mattered. If you'd asked me that first afternoon whether I believed buildings could have hours the way people have moods, I would have scoffed and said, I believe in air handling units and scheduling mistakes. But at 1:57, the ninth floor learned to repeat itself, and I began to believe in rehearsal. The luggage wheel squeaked past my door without rolling. The ice machine braced for a new note, then changed its mind. Somewhere around the T-junction, a voice picked up a sentence it had been trying to finish for decades, but if we reroute the flow through, then it stopped, as it always does, as if someone had put a comma in the middle of a scream. You hear that? Jules asked without taking the pencils out of her hair. Flow through what? Ella said. Flow through who? Flow through the stairwell, I wanted to say, because that's what my brain had been auto-completing since we checked in. But the word lodged. The hallway held it like a seed under ice. We didn't start with ghosts, we started with architecture. In the elevator lobby, a framed ribbon-cutting photo hung crooked. Behind it, taped to cinder block with painter's blue, we found an old floor plan. At some point, the ninth floor had been 2 floors, 4 and 5, later compressed to fit a conference center without lifting the roof. The old numbers ghosted under the new, 405 beneath 905, 421 beneath 921, a palimpsest of other decisions. Why compress? Jules said. To sell square footage without changing the skyline, I said, automatic. To convince history to share a bed. Ella rubbed her arms. I had a dream I was lower, she said. My ears popped when I sat up. The night manager, older than me or just better lit, stood at the far end of the hall with a wedge in her hand. If you're up, you can help, she said. She had the voice of someone who has learned the grammar of emergency and the courtesy of using it as sparingly as possible. The repeater likes a crowd. The what? Penny asked. The 9th floor repeater, the manager said, and nodded toward the stairwell door. A square of paint there bulged from the cinder block like a healed wound. She tests us. How? I asked. By starting again, she said. By refusing to finish the night until we finish it right. Behind her, hallway lit itself one fixture at a time, and then dimmed back to its practiced level. The ice machine chose a note, held it, faltered, held it again. At 2:06, laughter began near 921 without mouths. At 2:11, the elevator dinged for a car that wouldn't come. At 2:13, smoke arrived polite, low, the kind of smoke that apologizes for existing. The alarm panel in the lobby did nothing because it had learned to be shy around the hour. The manager put the wedge in my hand. When the alarm won't speak, you do, she said. Drill without alarm, toi. Hold the door. Count aloud. Sign for the ones the building remembers. You can't do a drill at night, Sai said, pure day shift logic. You can, the manager said, because you have to. We knocked. We lied kindly. We said this way, please, in a tone that tells a body the stairs will be patient. We took a toddler from a father who looked relieved to be asked and handed her back at the landing, as if she were made of glass and keys. We told tourists to bring phones, but not phone chargers. The elevator chattered behind closed doors like an animal learning to shake hands. Down in the lobby, air smelled like warm plastic and overcooked sugar, the hotel's memory of the worst thing that happened to it. The night manager produced a clipboard, already printed with names none of us recognized, and 2 extra columns labeled memory and lost and found. We signed for ourselves, and then signed for the printed names. The building exhaled a notch. At 3:13, the minute the 9th floor keeps for itself, the loops synchronized. Luggage squeak, ice hum, elevator ding. Then, like a conductor allowing a coda, everything let go. The laughter walked off. The smoke remembered it was tired. Upstairs, doors closed with the hush of pages turning. Back on 9, we found the patch in the stairwell warm to the touch. Beneath it, where paint had been layered like a scab, letters showed through. Fire door, do not block. A crack ran the long axis of no like a scar that refuses to be the end of the story. We slept a handful of practical hours. We taught software. We practiced smiling for people who didn't want to share their habits with a screen. The building put on daylight and pretended nothing had happened. The second night, the repeater came with different jokes. The ice machine switched notes and tried to keep both. The elevator doors opened and closed 1 inch, as if frightened of their own teeth. The voice at the T-junction made it to flow through the stair and choked on the well-kept secret of the word well. We asked for permission to help. We didn't get it. We helped anyway. The manager taped an index card behind the desk with a pen that had learned to write calm. 9th floor repeater protocol night. 0157 pre-check, wedge ready, cart staged. 0210 knock and confirm, 1 good night per door. We listen for the loop. 0230 ice hum check. If it cycles, run it. If it repeats, unplug/replug. 0300 attendance dry run, voices low, no banging. 0313 if loops sync, initiate DWA. After tags. Red equals fire drill complete/reverse do not disturb. Corporate will hate this, Jewel said. Corporate isn't here at 3:13, the manager said. She made the kind of eye contact that is a small oath. We did the work. We held the door. We signed the sheet for people the hotel didn't want to lose again. The building slept like an animal that trusts your hands near its bowl. Then corporate replaced the panel. It arrived in a box that said smart notifications, as if the previous machine had been dumb. The men who installed it had polo shirts with competence stitched into the sleeves. They unplugged the old panel with the reverence you reserve for organs. Its LED did a half-hearted segment dance, tried to spell ASK, failed. They mounted the new unit like a promise. It smiled in green. No more false alarms, the regional manager said, pleased with the syllables. It will self-test every hour on the hour, push alerts to management, and log everything. What about the things that aren't in its vocabulary? Ella asked. He blinked. I watched the hotel try that blink on and reject it. The system is modern, he said. The building will adjust. For 3 nights, it did. The 9th floor practiced good behavior like a dog after obedience school. The elevator chimed when called. The ice machine held its note. We stood down, uneasy, the way you do when a headache leaves too suddenly. On the fourth day, a tech company rented the ballroom for a product launch and fogged the air until light looked expensive. Fog bled under doors and found the stairwell like a creek returning to an old riverbed. On 9, the elevator changed its mind 3 times before opening. The ice machine tried a new note and fell out of key. The voice at the T-junction started its sentence at noon. "Why now?" the day manager asked, clutching the manifest like a rosary. "Because buildings don't care about clocks," Jules said, "only about repetition." We made DWA into a tour. We printed glossy tags on the office inkjet. Emergency red bleeding into the tooth of cardstock. Safety walk, 9th floor, 12:30 and 3:00. Tourists came because tourists love being part of a story they can end. We walked them through the stairwell ritual. Wedge, count, speak the letters on the wall. We handed out bottles of water with the reverence of sacraments. The building consented. The panels smiled emptily. The fog in the ballroom learned humility and went where it was told. For 2 weeks, we lived like this. DWA by day when the building ran the rehearsal early. DWA by night when 9 insisted on 3:13. We taught the client the difference between a workflow and a ritual. We pretended those words were cousins. Then came the night that made a method out of superstition. The ballroom hosted a gala with sparklers and fog, because videos online convince people that fire is confetti. At 1:57, 9 pulled taut. At 2:06, 10 rolled over and decided to sit up too. We'd never felt 10 before. It started in the teeth, the taste of old static. The stairwell patch on 10 didn't have letters at all, just a rectangle of new paint where words had been sanded away. "We can't run 2 at once," Penny said. "We don't run them," the manager said. "We let them run us in the correct order." We split. Ella and I took 9. Jules and the manager took 10. The panel in the lobby complained supervisory in a font that wanted to be a friend. We initiated the drill. We knocked. We counted. We put the wedge in the door and apologized to the letter do when the paint tried to climb. At 2:39, the laughter learned a word and tried to keep it. Reroute the flow through. We braced for the stairwell and the rest of the sentence, the confession that refuses to be told. The patch bubbled. A seam lifted, a smell like varnish that has seen heat decided to live here now. We reenact, Ella said calmly, and set 2 stacking chairs where someone once had blocked the door for a wedding photo. She took a picture with her phone, flash on, the white light rude in the stairwell's throat. She moved the chairs aside. She opened the door wide. We read the letters aloud, full voice, like a psalm. Fire door, do not block. The patch let go. It landed in Ella's hands like a passed plate. The words beneath shone raw. Behind them, the old scorch mark breathed without releasing heat. Names. Jules called from 10 over the walkie. "We need names." We had the clipboards printed ones. We had our own handwriting from nights past. We spoke them out loud because we'd learned buildings like mouths doing work. T, May, C. Thorn and Ella added pastry to the air because it felt right to say jobs when death had forgotten them. The service cart that appears only in these hours rolled out of the past with its own dignity. A drawer slid open. Inside lay a flattened trombone mouthpiece. A pastry spatula with its handle melted slightly at the end. "We're not keeping those," I said, idiotic, as if the cart takes instruction. "We're not," Ella said softly. "She put them back the way you put a child's toy where the child will find it again later." We hung tags. We left one on a blank panel with no knob because the hotel has doors that are only for memory. At 3:13, the loops let go their grip by polite inches. 10 matched 9's breath, like siblings learning to share a room. The panel smiled a vacuous, all clear. We slept the way people sleep after saying something hard out loud. After that, the 9th floor repeater didn't disappear. It learned. It asked earlier when fog bled under ballroom doors. It asked later when weddings insisted that love was immune to schedule. It asked gently most nights, with just enough shoe squeak and ice machine wobble to remind us what we'd done. We wrote the protocol nicely and put it in a binder so corporate could call it a policy. The 9th floor method. Pre-check 157. Stage wedge, confirm stairwells clear. Courtesy knock 210. 1 good night per door, listen for loops. Mechanical soothing 230. Ice machine cycle, elevator reset if necessary. Announce 250. This property practices endings. Please walk with us. Reenact/undo as needed. Place/remove obstruction. Read letters aloud. Memory roll call 305. Names on clipboard, including roles if known. Dwa 313. Hold door, count bodies, water at lobby. Tags, fire drill complete out. Do not disturb on reverse. Aftercare, coffee, water, silence. Corporate didn't forbid it. They filmed it, set it to friendly music, and called it culture of safety in a deck that would win someone a bonus. We let them have the language. We kept the wedge. Sometimes the building gave us things as if to say thank you for finishing what we started. A photocopy of an incident report from 1989 slid under the office door. Wedding party, obstructed stair egress for photo. Panel malfunction. 3 missing, 1 later accounted for. The later accounted for was hand-edited twice, then crossed out. A cassette labeled evac announcement. We had no machine to play. A black and white 5x7 of the ballroom with chairs stacked politely where no chairs should be, and a cake that, if you stared long enough, seemed to inhale. I kept pretending I was a rational person doing rational work. I kept being right and wrong at once. The night before we were due to hand the client back to their own staff and fly home, the repeater decided to sit on my chest like a cat that weighs the same as responsibility. The gala broke its own end time. The sparklers sputtered into the stairwell. The fog learned the stair's geometry and practiced it. The panel blinked standby and made the face of a cartoon that had never breathed smoke. We did it again. We told 100 people the story of getting out. We told the building we remembered the words it prefers. We said the names out loud. We laughed back once at laughter with no mouth because we'd learned that shames it. We reenacted the error and undid it carefully, like children confessing because they want dessert. Down in the parking lot, we handed out water and silence. The night was warm and wet. I watched faces change temperature as understanding became habit. A man in a tux signed the clipboard Without asking why, there were 2 columns. A woman in a robe held a fire drill complete tag to her chest, the way people hold flowers that aren't theirs. We went back up. We removed the wedge only when the stair had learned to breathe without help. The panel smiled. It meant nothing. We let it. In the morning, someone on day shift had made our mischief look respectable. A box on the front desk held professionally printed red tags with a finish that refused to run. The phrases were the same. The weight felt like policy. I almost cried. We added 2 lines to the method and stuck it inside the fire panel's door, so even the smart machine had to look at it whenever it thought about telling us what to do. Guest script for day or night. This property practices endings. Please walk with us. Debrief. We sign for memory. We speak names. We don't argue with doors. I packed that afternoon. My flight was at 6. I tucked a red tag into my carry-on and slid the wedge the manager had given me into a side pocket. Ridiculous, as it felt to travel with a piece of plastic that makes doors behave. Jules hugged me in the lobby like a sibling who thinks hugs are for people who deserve them. Ella said, "Call if you hear an elevator at 157, and I said, "I will," and we both pretended it was a joke. On the train out of the city, the car hummed. I put my hand on the emergency call button once, gently, the way you touch a relic to remember that it was made by ordinary hands. It didn't ring 3 times, it rang once. A conductor's voice said, "Everything okay?" And I said, "Just practicing," and he laughed without understanding. It was enough. Back home, I hung the red tag on the hook by my door, fire drill complete facing out, because some days feel that way. On nights when the world insists on repeating itself, bad news, bad loop, bad habits, I flip it to do not disturb and pretend that a sign can ask an hour to leave me alone. Sometimes it works. Sometimes I wedge the stairwell door in my apartment building just for a minute and let the air move. Neighbors smile at me like I'm practicing a talent show trick. I smile back and don't teach them the words unless they ask. The building calls sometimes. Not the hotel, the building. A bell from nowhere at 157. The taste of static behind my teeth. A shoe squeak passing my door without weight. I stand up. I press 2 fingers to my wrist and count. I breathe until the moment lets go. I whisper again into the room, not as curse, but as mercy, because asking for another chance is one of the kindest things we get to do. If you stay at that hotel and your door gets a red tag without anyone knocking, don't be frightened. We're not grading you. We're inviting you into the rehearsal. When someone with a wedge says walk, walk. When the stairwell asks you to read the words on the wall, read them like a promise and a confession. If laughter begins without mouths, laugh back once and no more. If the paint lifts, reenact the error and undo it. Name the names even if you don't know their faces. Sign for memory and for lost and found, and let the air move. If someone in a suit tells you liability, say morality back until the syllables sit right. If someone asks why we practice at night, point them to the lobby and the line of faces drinking water like faith. If someone asks whether the 9th floor is haunted, tell them the truth. It learned how to end, and it won't let the rest of us forget. Sometimes a city blocks its own fire door and calls it progress. Sometimes a hotel sands the letters off the wall and calls it renovation. Sometimes we're the ones with the chairs in the wrong place. We can put them back. We can hold the door. We can count out loud. We can teach the panel a new face and the hour a new grammar. We can decide that again isn't punishment. It's practice. That's what we did on 9. That's what we taught 10 to do. That's what I try to do now, far from the fog machines and the ballroom and the ice machine with the faithful note. I keep a wedge in my trunk, a red tag in my bag, and a sentence ready in my mouth. Fire door do not block. Not a rule, a promise, an apology, a finish to someone else's sentence. And when the building asks, because it will some night in some city, in a stairwell that doesn't know your name, I'll answer the way we always did, with bodies in motion and voices steady, and a door held open until the air remembers how to be kind. Again, 5 hotels, 5 kinds of obedience, what they taught us, written in red and underlined by the dark. Answer on the 3rd ring, but don't give your name back. At midnight, even as never. If you see S, keep your hands inside the car. We house what hurts, so house the one who houses it. Comp the room the building asks for, and it might let you leave your name behind. Politeness is a lock. When a handmaid do not disturb says please, the whole property learns to whisper. Endings are rituals. Hold the fire door. Count aloud. Sign for memory and for lost and found, and the loops will let go. If you're on the night shift tonight, may your pool stay flat, your mirrors keep time, and your stairwells breathe just enough. If you're a guest, hang the sign. Take the earplugs. When someone knocks in a voice that belongs to dusk, open and walk. This has been voices from the other side. Sleep well. And if a room calls that isn't on the map, let it go to voicemail. 5 hotels, 5 kinds of obedience, what they taught us, written in red and underlined by the dark. Answer on the 3rd ring, but don't give your name back. At midnight, even as never. If you see S, keep your hands inside the car. We house what hurts, so house the one who houses it. Comp the room the building asks for, and it might let you leave your name behind. Politeness is a lock. When a handmaid do not disturb says please, the whole property learns to whisper. Endings are rituals. Hold the fire door. Count aloud. Sign for memory and for lost and found, and the loops will let go. If you're on the night shift tonight, may your pool stay flat, your mirrors keep time, and your stairwells breathe just enough. If you're a guest, hang the sign. Take the earplugs. When someone knocks in a voice that belongs to dusk, open and walk. This has been voices from the other side. Sleep well. And if a room calls that isn't on the map, let it go to voicemail.